We are live with you on Pittsburgh Sports Live with your latest Pittsburgh postgame. The Penguins needed overtime, needed a shootout, in fact, to get it done. Jake Gensel scoring in the fourth round. They had to come back a couple of times, too, even though they scored very early on in their first home game of the season. And, Alan, I think I might have been guilty earlier in the broadcast last time around with Dan Kingerski after the opening loss to the Flyers, of being really in locked in mid-season, late season playoff mode. I think I was just excited about seeing hockey back. But today, it just made me realize, seeing some of the continued sloppy play from both sides, really, plenty of odd man rushes, teams not looking locked down in their systems, guys not looking sharp on the puck. This is really the equivalent of September hockey that we're watching right now, despite the fact that it counts in the standings. So that's what I'm trying to do today, have a more measured approach, a more reasonable approach, and more reasonable expectations. How have you seen the first three games of the season?
Well, it's a lot easier to have more reasonable expectations when you don't get shellacked by your biggest rival. Let's put that out there, right? I mean, that stings no matter whether it's in preseason hockey or in the playoffs. And so I think that probably had a lot to do with the sort of emotional response you saw from a lot of people after those first two games. I think if those were two lopsided losses to the Florida Panthers, it would come a lot differently to people. But yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be, as we've seen in almost every sport that's played under these conditions, consistency are going to be hard to find. Teams finding their game is going to be hard to find. I mean, I think there's been a lot of times where we thought teams were going to be really good, and then I look at a team like, I don't know, Penn State football. They were like a top 15 team. They came out and were terrible the first half of the season. Then all of a sudden they looked like we thought they were going to look in the second half. Fortunately for the Penguins, hockey has a much more forgiving structure than college football. They have plenty of opportunities to make the postseason. All their games are against their divisional opponents, so they all mean exactly the same. And so I think as long as this doesn't become something that lasts more than a game or two when it comes to some slow play to start the season, it will not be a big issue for the Penguins. I think there are some issues that have come up in these first couple games that seem like they might be. I thought they got better goaltending today from Casey DeSmith, but I think that is maybe issue number one that has been exposed from these first three games now is can the Penguins get quality goaltending without Matt Murray? And if they can, I think the rest of the season will go a lot better than the first three games have gone.
Yeah, DeSmith, big time stick tap to him, because I'm not sure he would have expected he was going to start here today. I didn't expect him to start. Tristan Jarry has never played against the Capitals, believe it or not. And I think Ilya Samsonov in the Caps net has only played once previously against the Penguins. So I thought we'd see the two, I don't want to call them heir apparents, but the two young up-and-coming starters get a chance to duel today. But DeSmith, who previous to Friday in Philly in his relief appearance, hadn't played an NHL game in 22 months, almost 2 full years. Played a pretty strong game here today, and it was a low event game. If you're looking at just shot attempts, Alan, just 32 apiece in 5-on-5 situations, and overall the Penguins had the edge there, 47-39. But that's not a lot of shots, especially for a game that goes to overtime. But plenty of scoring chances. The Penguins had 30 scoring chances per natural stat trick to 18 for the Caps, 14-9 high danger. So the goalies had to earn their money today, for sure. And I think Samsonov did a fine job in getting this one to OT. The Penguins were pretty good after Backstrom scored to put the Capitals ahead on the power play in the second period. I think the Caps had one 5-on-5 shot for a stretch of about 20 minutes of game action. So I don't think it's a stretch at all to say that the Penguins deserved to win this one. I think deserve might have been a strong word on Friday just because of their egregious defensive breakdowns. But that's 2 straight games where I felt like they were the better team pretty clearly by the run of play. So let's keep that in mind. Hockey can be a random game at times, and especially in a short sample, almost literally anything can happen. Again, Pens win at 4-3 in the shootout, and we saw Marcus Pettersson get on the board here today. We saw Colton Sevier score a disputed goal for a bit, but the fourth line checked in there. But I'm going to talk about the third line, Alan. That's been a revelation to me. I mentioned this in the first Pittsburgh postgame of the season. I had no expectations for Mark Jankowski. I think he's been a good fit alongside McCann and Brandon Tanev. You want to talk about Tanev in specific, and he's been his usual shot out of a cannon himself so far, but he's gotten a couple of points. and overall has looked like a guy maybe not worth his contract necessarily, but someone who's definitely going to help push things in the positive direction. And that third line overall looks like a great fit. So why do you think it has been a good fit?
Well, I think McCann and Tanev have a lot of complementary skill sets. They're both pretty fast. You have a fairly creative offensive player in McCann and a guy that loves to get on pucks in Tanev and is also fairly defensively responsible. I felt like the Penguins had 2/3 of a pretty good third line coming into this season. And then I didn't think Mark Jankowski would be a very good fit at all for what those two do. And it turns out he's been pretty good in that role. Another defensively responsible guy, not as fast, but seems to have been able to find those two guys in open space. To me, I think the biggest thing about that line is they're doing, and Tanev specifically is doing, what the Penguins aren't getting from the first two lines, and they are hounding defenses. They are getting on pucks. They're making life miserable for the opposing defense. And when you have your third line doing that, like, that's supposed to be the time when the opposing team can put out their worst pair and try to shelter in place for 5 minutes while they don't have to deal with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. And I'll be honest, if I was playing defense right now, I'd rather take Malkin or Crosby's line than have what Tanev and McCann are doing to you trying to get out of the defensive zone. They're just relentless with their forecheck, and they turn it over. And if you turn it over, they're so fast that they don't give you time to respond. And so I think that third line is really exactly what the Penguins need. I think the top two lines need to play better. They need to keep up. Tanev might be the best forward they've had on the team through 3 games. I don't think anyone would have predicted that. Yes, his contract is probably still more than he is worth, but I think you can say that a lot about a lot of those guys that the Penguins have had in that spark plug third line role. I'm not sure Carl Hagelin ever played to his contract. I'm not sure that Pat Hornquist over the last few years has played to his contract, but as long as you get the production that you need out of that third line, it can be worth it in the short term. And yeah, I think Brandon Tanev, I think I was pretty wrong about Brandon Tanev. I mean, I thought he would be okay, but I didn't think he would be that good in that he's really driving play for the Penguins offense in a way that I wasn't sure was possible.
Yeah, I'm impressed, and I was guilty of writing him off as soon as the ink was drying on the contract as far as being someone who's going to help, like I said, push play. I didn't think it would be the case. I think he would make some good hustle plays. He would stand out to your casual fans especially, like, wow, that guy's really playing hard. But he's been productive and also a good penalty killer too, which is not to be ignored. Now, I do want to get to the top two lines in just a second, in particular the second one. But I also want to mention that we do have a couple of comments here on the YouTube chat. Walt Flanagan, always want to see what he has to say. He says, can't we just admit the Flyers are good? Yeah, I'm not saying the Flyers aren't good. They're going to be a real tough out this year. And I would have to imagine they're going to finish in the top 4 of the East Division and make those playoffs, or at least be, one of those teams that's right there until the very bitter end of the 56-game season. And I do think a lot of Pens fans aren't giving the Flyers enough credit. Maybe they're still feeling like that's the plucky young team that got into the playoffs a couple of years ago, but the Pens got rid of them in the first round. So it's not like I think that the Pens totally handed the Flyers those games. Philadelphia is good, and the Capitals should be pretty strong too. But let's talk top two lines, because the whole basis of the Penguins, the whole concept here, Alan, is that they're going to get elite play from the top two lines more often than not. And the first line's been pretty good. You have Crosby, I think, looking maybe not necessarily midseason form, but pretty close, and as always, being workmanlike and doing all the little things too. Gensel, not quite as sharp. Rodriguez got a goal today. I think he looked like he was a little bit more up to pace. But outside of Zucker missing a couple of grade A chances, we're seeing Rust and Malkin struggle to find their legs here. What do you think they need to do more, or is it time to already blow up that line and try to find some different combination?
I think Brian Rust is an interesting guy because his last season and a half really has been such an aberration compared to the rest of his career that I think he has probably less of a leash than a guy like Evgeny Malkin, who has been one of the best players in the NHL for a decade. I think you have to, if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins, whatever there is wrong with Evgeny Malkin or whatever is not right, you kind of, and I think you can say the same thing for Chris Letang on defense. You don't really have any choice but to play them through it and try to work with them and figure it out. It's not the case with guys to throw on Malkin's right wing. If Brian Rust doesn't have it, try somebody else. It's not going to hurt. He can play a third or even a fourth line role if you don't want to break up what that third line is doing. He's done it many times in his career. And I think one of the things that has made the Penguins special over the years is that their centers have been able to elevate the play of lesser players. You know, Sidney Crosby spent most of the best years of his career playing with Chris Kunitz and Pascal Dupuis, who are probably third and fourth liners on any other team for most of their career, and spent, you know, a good long stretch on the first line with Sidney Crosby. You know, is Brian Rust a guy that's going to drive play on that second line, or is he a passenger? If he's a passenger, he can be replaced. And I'm not sure the Penguins have another obvious choice unless you break up that third line to go on Malkin's right wing, at least until Kasperi Kapanen gets on board with the team. Maybe he's an option there. I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't hesitate to feel like, you know, changes could be made, especially the line combinations that aren't working. You know, I did talk about how the hockey season is more forgiving than maybe a sport like college football, but it's still a short hockey season. And so, you know, I do think more urgency needs to be applied when it comes to coaching decisions like that than you would generally say 3 games into a season.
Speaking of coaching decisions, nice segue here. For the first time, we see Mike Matheson sit out. I didn't think we'd see it 3 games into the year, but he's been running around a bit and chasing the puck and not looking like he's completely comfortable with the system that he's playing, first and foremost. And again, like I said, a lot of these guys need to be judged. All these guys need to be judged on a bit of a curve here with the lack of a preseason. But we see Juuso Riikola play with Chad Ruhwedel on the third pairing. And Alan, I got to say, they didn't stand out in a negative way. And that's what you want from the third pairing more than anything else. In fact, I would say they outplayed Marino and Pettersson, despite Pettersson's goal in the second period there. So we see Mike Sullivan already willing to stir the pot, but I'm also tempering reading too much into that with the idea that maybe this is kind of like a preseason scenario where you want to get guys some game action. They played some intra-squad scrimmages, and that's it. And a guy like Riikola hasn't played an actual game since March or February of last year. So I think there's part of that motivating this decision to already throw some things into the blender on the defensive end to sit CC for a second straight game as well. I think the coaches need to see who they have in a lot of ways. And remember that Todd Reardon hasn't gotten to see Riikola and Ruhwedel as well play up close. So that's where I'm at with that. Yes, I'm happy to see Sullivan willing to make a couple of changes and tweaks here, but also I wouldn't be surprised if it's Matheson and CC right back in there for game 4 or 5 at this point. How do you feel on that?
I don't think Matheson and CC are a good combination. Matheson is a very aggressive, very high risk, high reward kind of player. He's going to push the pace offensively, and he's prone to creating chaos. I believe that's what I said when the Pens got him, is just, you know, he goes up ice. He doesn't get back necessarily. Sometimes he gets back and makes a mess of things. And to me, CC is the kind of player that thrives in structure. He's not chaos. And so I think that the Pens actually acknowledge that. They started the season with Matheson with Marino, who's a better skater, you know, seems like more of a heady offensive option than CC. So I think that's the issue, is that I think maybe their 5th and 6th best defensemen don't play very well together. And so then you kind of have to figure out what makes the best third pair out of the kind of 4 options they have there. I think Matheson is – and the other thing is I don't think Matheson played particularly well compared to how well he's capable of playing in those first 2 games. And so, you know, maybe the coach wants to get some attention, especially after a couple of undisciplined penalties I thought that were pretty unnecessary. You know, setting somebody down, especially a younger player who's new to the team, is not necessarily the worst strategy to get someone's attention to some details that have been lacking. I like Chad Ruhwedel. I always have. I think he's capable of being a strong number 6 defenseman in the NHL. He's, to me, the question is, you know, what makes the best third pairing, and then what makes the best penalty kill? Because there aren't like a ton of, I mean, you have Brian Dumoulin that you figure is going to be on that penalty kill, but of the rest of the Penguins' top 4, I wouldn't consider any of those other guys really a penalty kill specialist. I think their penalty kill has really hurt them so far this year. So maybe whoever is the best penalty killer kind of gets in that number 6 spot by default, and then you play the number 5 around him. I'm not sure, but I think that's to me, the most glaring issue maybe of the skaters so far has been when they're shorthanded.
Yeah, it's a good point about the special teams. Generally speaking, I think the special teams are the primary reason why they don't have a regulation win yet through 3 games. And 2 hard-fought points today, but they still haven't played a 60 minutes where you could be proud of the entire 60 minutes, or at least close enough to the entire 60. And so many times special teams decides things in a league like this that has so much parity, in a sport like this that naturally has the parity built in. You've mentioned the PK. I want to talk about the power play too. And speaking of Todd Reardon, I liked the movement that we saw away from the puck in games 1 and 2. And I think the Penguins did some good things to put themselves in position to make some dangerous plays and score some goals today against the Capitals. But I believe also they were guilty of some overpassing early that first power play, one too many drop passes on more than one occasion, and situations where they just can't take what's in front of them and let the shots go. Now, we saw it later in the game. That fourth power play was better in getting pucks to the net. But overall, there are still some habits that need to die, some painful deaths here as far as that power play goes, because as we've seen, you look at the other side of the ice here today, Alan, and you see the Capitals. Yeah, last year was a down year for them on the power play, but overall, they've just been able to make it work. And of course, it helps to have a playmaker like Backstrom on the opposite side of a complete howitzer machine like Alex Ovechkin. Then you have John Carlson, one of the top power play defensemen in the league at the point too. But the Penguins have guys who can at least come close to that level of consistency. So for me, I still have hope in this year's power play, but again, we're trial by fire mode right now as far as just putting some of these concepts into practice without much practice, literally.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. It really shows that the teams that have continuity of coaching, players, and systems are going to have an advantage early in the year. The Pens do not have that on their power play. They're going to have to sort of work their way into game readiness while playing, and I think that's going to be obvious. That's why I think the penalty kill is actually a bigger issue to me. I kind of expected their power play to start slowly. Their penalty kill should be a lot of the same and mostly the same guys. CC's obviously new if he's going to be a part of that mix. But yeah, I'm disappointed by the penalty kill in general. The power play, it seems like they're close. It doesn't seem to me like they're just lost out there. There's just a couple of misconnections. A couple of passes made just not quite quickly enough, or maybe should not have been made. A little more focus on getting the puck to the net, and I'm not sure they have figured out who is going to really be that net front guy. I think they're trying to make that Brian Rust. I think he's actually a little bit better when he's able to pop up into the slot and turn and pounce on some rebounds. He's not the kind of guy that's going to sit there and take cross checks all day. So I don't know. I don't know what happens there. Maybe they move to more of a spread out look or put somebody behind the goal line. But it doesn't feel like it's a disaster so far to me. I think they're close. I think they just need to get a little bit sharper. And they need, frankly, to put some in the back of the net that they've had opportunities. I mean, it's not like they're not getting scoring chances. And some of that just comes down to precision. And also, I felt like against the Flyers that the heart was a significant factor, that they had some scoring chances and they got out goaltended.
And we did talk about goaltending today. One other thing I wanted to address before we wrap up the show here, and again, thank you for watching Pittsburgh Postgame. Have a couple other comments that we'll get to. But Alan, I mentioned before the season that I thought Chris Letang had the potential to be the most important player for the Penguins. Number one, I think reports of his demise are exaggerated, largely because he was saddled to Jack Johnson for about 50% of his minutes last year, which is ridiculous. It shouldn't have happened, but it did. One of my main complaints about Mike Sullivan last year was the fact that he kept going back to that pairing. I just couldn't figure it out. Why would you want to neutralize one of your top, literally your top defenseman with maybe the worst guy in the league, the worst play driver in the league? But thank goodness the JJ era is over here in Pittsburgh, and we can look forward to perhaps a more impactful season for Letang. Reasons I'm bullish on him is I still think he is in tremendous shape, number one. Number two, I also feel like he, in the past, has had some bad injury luck that's maybe due to go a different way here. So, yeah, part of it is probably just feelings. But in today's NHL, you need to have driving play from your defenseman in order to be consistent at the offensive end, in addition to the defending end. So I feel like Chris Letang has the most potential to take a step forward here and be the reason why the Penguins win. I think it's been a kind of a quiet first 3 games for Chris overall. I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing because I want to see him making an impact. One thing I do like is we are seeing the Penguins D-men push up into the offensive zone a little bit more, and also just in general being a little more aggressive from those in-zone situations. I think a lot of times we talk about being on the rush when we discuss defensemen helping out and chipping in on the attack. But for me, it's as much about in the zone. So hopefully they can continue that, and hopefully that leads to more production from Chris Letang. Are you still optimistic that he still has some productive seasons ahead of him where he can still be like a top 10, top 15 NHL defender?
I'm not ready to like put the shovel into the ground and bury Chris Letang's career at this point, but I also think he's been pretty bad the first 3 games of the season. He was not great in the end of last season. It's strange because I have not seen some sort of substantial physical decline in his ability. I think that's the part that really makes me unsure as to what's going on there. It's not like he doesn't feel slower to me. He still gets just as much on his shot. He still plays a ton of minutes, seemingly fairly effortlessly. So to me, there's a big disconnect. Like when I saw Patrick Hornquist over the last 2 years, you just like, okay, he's not the same player. He doesn't have the wheels. He doesn't have the motor. He doesn't have the energy. He's clearly a guy on the decline. I don't see that when I watch Chris Letang play, and yet the results have gotten worse. And so I'm not sure what the issue is, and that makes me unsure whether or not it's fixable, right? I mean, is it just, like you said, playing with Jack Johnson last year a lot? I don't know. The guy's in great shape, too, from every person I've ever talked to that spent time in the Penguins locker room or around him in the offseason, talks all and on about, the kind of fitness freak he is. And so I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Is it focus? Is it discipline? Is it just a clash with the systems being played? And maybe Todd Reirden will be some kind of big boon for him, but then a very poor start to this season. And so I don't know what's wrong. And I think when you don't know what's wrong, it's very difficult to have optimism about it getting better. That's not to say that it can't, but I don't have any real strong reason to think that he's going to have some kind of turnaround to being a top 10 NHL defenseman. But like I said before, the Penguins essentially have no other option. I mean, they're limited by their salary cap space. It's not like a number 1 defenseman coming into Pittsburgh is a reasonable expectation at any point this season. And while I like John Marino and Chad Ruhwedel on the right side, I don't see a third guy that's going to step up there and take away Chris Letang's minutes. So it's him for better or worse for at least the rest of this season.
Well, the Penguins finally get 2 points this season. They get it in their 3rd game. They get it via the shootout, but all those caveats aside, it is a victory per NHL bookkeeping, 4-3 over the Caps. Alan, I know you have to go, but I want to get your opinion quickly on the Mass Mutual East Division. That's the last time I will use the the corporate tag there. But 8 teams, I think you could argue even up to 7 of them are contenders to finish in the top 4. I guess we'll see about the Sabres. They have a lot to prove, but they're definitely more dangerous with the addition of Hall. Who do you see winning the division? And if it's not the Penguins, where do you see the Penguins finishing by the time we get to, second week of May, I think is when the playoffs are due to start?
It's a strong division. It's very strong. I think to me, Boston and Philly are ahead of everybody else. And then after that, there's a number of teams that could take those last 2 spots. I think the Capitals are a good team. I think the Islanders have the kind of system that makes a weird mixed up year. Like other teams are off their game, and when your game is not doing anything, it's very hard to be off your game. And so I think I'm sort of maybe more bullish about them than I would generally be considering their talent level, just because I think they're in a better position to deal with different availabilities and mixed up schedules than maybe most teams are. The Canes are a very good team and have been for a couple of years. And so there aren't very many easy outs either. Sometimes we've seen these divisions where you have like this big top of the division where there's all these really good teams, and then the bottom two just get killed every game. I'm not sure I see that. Yeah, Buffalo, I guess, is down there, but I'm expecting a very, very competitive division where maybe only one team is really able to separate themselves from the pack by, the end of the season. I think we're going to be coming into the last couple of weeks of the season with 6 teams, all wondering what's going to happen, whether they're going to make the playoffs or not. And I think that's great for hockey. I love seeing the classic teams over and over again. I'll be honest, I want to see Connor McDavid, and as a paying customer, I want to go to the rink and watch him play, right? But if the fans aren't going to be there anyway, I can watch Connor McDavid play the Flames. I'd rather see the Penguins play the teams they hate, right? To me, that makes for better television. Connor McDavid's only a channel away, and I can watch him whenever I want. And so I think that's I think it's a great solution for a season without fans, and I'm excited to see these teams get to hate each other again. I think that's going to be one of the best things that comes out of this season.
Yeah, I like a lot of the modifications. I like the reduced travel. I like the baseball style series here, or you could call it like mini playoff series as well, 2 in the same city. Maybe they could carry that over into the future. I also do like seeing teams like Buffalo. There's no reason Pittsburgh and Buffalo shouldn't be in the same division in anything, really. They're just up the road here, so that'll be good. And I'm hoping for the Sabres that they're competitive, because I think the NHL is better when the Sabres are good, because Buffalo's a damn good hockey town. We know Pittsburgh is a good hockey town as well, and we know that Penguins fans are happy to get the 2 points. Alan, I'm going to let you go. I have a few minutes left here. I'm just going to devote it to viewer comments here on Pittsburgh Postgame. But thank you so much for joining me. Always great to chat with you. Alan Saunders of Pittsburgh Sports Now. The jack of all trades, the man for all seasons, Mr. Saunders. Thanks again.
Yeah, we got them all up there somewhere. If you look closely, you can find them all. Thanks for having me, and we'll do it again soon.
Yep, just Google them, folks. That's where you can find them online. I was going to read the Twitter handle and everything, but yeah, just search. You'll be fine. Alan Saunders coming to us from the eastern suburbs. This is Matt Gajtka here from my mobile studio here in the North Hills of Pittsburgh, where I just watched a very entertaining hockey game. I hope you liked it. To Alan's point, I thought it was outstanding. We saw some animosity boil up in that second game of the Flyers mini-series this past week in Philly. And then today we saw a pretty classic Pens Caps, a little up and down, and plenty of scoring chances for both sides. I don't know if it's going to be quite as freewheeling in the rematch here coming up on, I believe it's Wednesday. I think it's 2 days off here for the Penguins, if I'm not mistaken, as they stay home for a little bit. For whatever that's worth, at least they get to sleep in their own beds, even if they don't get to have their home fans cheering them on. A reminder that we're streaming on, well, basically it feels like every available internet channel right now. I want to go over to Facebook and take some of your comments here. Stephen Jasso says, finally, regards to the 2 points. Yeah, it felt like it's been a while. Remember the Penguins, of course, slumped out of the playoffs in the summer, and they just played 4 games in the summer. It's been a long time since we've gotten to see the Penguins play, not low consequence games necessarily, but games where you can take them all in a larger sample and allow yourself to evaluate instead of making the knee jerks here and there that are characteristic to a playoff series. James Croyle says Malkin is consistently lazy. I don't know if I agree that he's lazy. I think he loses focus, and I think he gets discouraged more easily than, say, someone like Sidney Crosby, who's basically a hockey-playing robot. And I think we've seen Sid look a lot more ready for the season to start than, say, Malkin and Letang. So credit to Sid, as always. That's why he's one of the best ever. That's why I put him in my top 5 ever in the NHL, if not even top 3, just because of his professionalism. And more often than not, you're going to see human beings act like you see Malkin and Letang act, where they're a little more emotionally driven, a little more up and down. I'm guilty of that from time to time, if I'm being quite honest. But point taken, James. I think he can look like he's lazy. And in a lot of ways, that's just as bad as actually being lazy when it comes to production. Hank Tenfeldy asks, can we stop putting Gino and Tanger together in the shootout? Yeah, I agree with that. You saw what Gensel could do in the 4th round. Jake Gensel is so nifty around the net. He seems like a natural fit for a shootout. But then again, we don't see shootouts that often. This is the first one that I can remember in a long time, notwithstanding the fact we haven't played hockey a long time. You know what I mean. And finally, Brett David Freitag, on Facebook says, I think it's almost impossible to take anything away from these 3 games. It's 3 games with limited camp and preseason. That was my point at the top of the show with Alan. And for the most part, I agree with you. Brett also says the Stars will be fine, and no defenseman in the league is asked to do more than Chris Letang. Yeah, right. He's on the power play. He's penalty killing. I don't know if I'd say no defenseman in the league is asked to do more. There's probably a couple of guys like a Victor Hedman who get a little more heavy minutes, but for the most part, you're right. It's splitting hairs to say there's anybody head and shoulders above him in terms of responsibility. So keep that in mind. He's not being sheltered. He's not being deployed in any advantageous way. He's taking on the top opponents night in and night out. And maybe at this point of his career, we should hope for more quiet games than loud, brash games from Chris Letang. But to my point, I think he needs to be a play driver and a catalyst here in order for the Penguins to go where they want to go. On YouTube, NES Addict says he's curious to see what Hornqvist does in Florida. I have to admit, I haven't really missed Patrick Hornqvist in the first 3 games of this season. Yeah, he was awesome in front of the net, but I'm of the opinion in modern hockey, net front presence is vastly overrated. And you see great power plays, if you're talking just special teams, great power plays like that of the Tampa Bay Lightning. You look in the playoffs last year on their way to the Cup, no one was in front of the net. Everyone's switching positions. It's total hockey, if you will. It's positionless hockey to an extent. Not all the time, but for the most part. And I think Hornqvist just didn't have the wheels, to Alan Saunders' point, to keep up with that kind of a system. I think he could think the game okay, but so often possessions ended with Hornqvist just taking a pointless shot into the crest of a goalie. So I'm okay with moving on from Hornqvist. The question is, can Matheson be that X factor? And, well, I guess we'll see how he bounces back in response to being healthy scratched for the first time in his Penguins career. And NES Addict also adds, just happy to see them get a win, especially against the Caps. Yeah, that's what's going to be really interesting about this season. You're not going to have a win where you're like, yeah, whatever. That game was I wasn't so hyped up for it, because you're going to have Caps and Islanders and Rangers and Flyers. I suppose Sabres doesn't have quite that same cachet. Maybe the Devils the same way. But you add the Bruins to the division too. I know Penguins fans love to beat the Bruins, and those games are typically intense and high-powered offensively. So I'm actually quite thrilled to look ahead and see how this all develops. And we get that rematch factor right away again with the Capitals staying in town and continuing this. I believe it's a 4-game homestand for the Penguins here as they return from their little sojourn to Philadelphia to start the year. Just want to confirm the day of our next game before I sign off here on Pittsburgh Postgame. Thanks for all the comments. We also have one on Twitter. I don't want to forget about that as well. A fan saying he didn't like the camera angle in today's game. I wasn't sure that I really noticed that it was any different. It is definitely different to see the seats tarped over. But overall, I didn't think about the fans that much, if at all, during this one. And I was happy to see Party Hard and hear Party Hard is back as the goal anthem for the Pens, too. So kudos to the game entertainment staff for putting that one back in the rotation. Okay, Caps again against the Penguins on Tuesday night. I misspoke. It's not Wednesday. It's Tuesday, 7 o'clock. And then we'll see the Rangers in over the weekend, next weekend for a Friday and a Sunday. Looking at Friday for our next Pittsburgh postgame here, by the way, on Pittsburgh Hockey Now, in addition to Pittsburgh Sports Live and all our relevant channels there. Penguins win 4-3. Jake Gensel gets the only goal in a 4-round shootout, but overall the Penguins outperformed the Capitals from about the midway point of that game on, and you'd always rather finish strong than start strong, wouldn't you? So we'll talk to you next time right here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Again, this is Matt Gajtka saying good day and God bless. See you later. See you for that Rangers series, in fact, right here on Pittsburgh Sports.